Okay, guys, welcome to the workshop at Serenby in the year 2023. This was a really interesting workshop week for us because typically we would focus on probably a larger single family home as our subject, so we can get interiors, exteriors, etc. But this particular year, the developers, and remember, the folks at Serenby typically are gracious enough to allow us, and by us, I mean about 20 people, into this show home. And the show home, of course, is built by the developers at Serenby, and they invite about 15, give or take, or sometimes a few less, sometimes a few more. I think it's about 15 interior design firms to essentially decorate and design specific spaces inside of the show home. So it's pretty cool in that each of the design firms are kind of trying to put their stamp visually, texturally, just style wise on their spaces, right? So in a sense, they're each trying to be individuals, but they also are trying to respect the fact that the home needs to be complete and feel consistent to a degree. And on the other hand, they're all trying to kind of outdo one another, right? So that is kind of an interesting phenomenon. Now, in this particular case, I mean, the same rules applied. However, instead of it being a larger single family structure, this was actually separated into two smaller side-by-side townhomes. Now, that posed a challenge for us in a lot of respects because, uh, you know, they were in bigger spaces that we can kind of spread out in. So when you're shooting with groups of 2 to 3 people, and this year we actually had we had 15 photographers come in 2023. Basically, for most of our workshops, we have 15. We limit it to 15, even though last year in 2024 we limited it to 12, just to keep it a little bit more intimate feeling. And I think moving forward, we're probably going to limit it to 10 or 12 as well. But that said, 2 townhomes, 15 people. I guess one benefit in the fact that these are like 3-story homes, if you will, it allowed people to kind of become very tight knit in terms of focusing on their own group, right? So people weren't really on each other or seeing each other or interfacing with one another. But truthfully, that's kind of one of the cool things about the workshop is that I love the idea of collaboration. And we as lone wolf photographers typically, it's rare that we are interfacing with other photographers, certainly, or even other people during our photo shoots. But that said, this was a rather unusual year for us in that we were shooting 2 different townhomes. So people were kind of spread out and somewhat isolated to a degree. This is probably one of the original workshop images that I shared with the group that included this kind of mist or this light beam effect. And I'm going to show you guys that in great detail today. And I'm also going to show you how you can do it pretty easily. Okay, so this is the focus of our tutorial today. And let's kind of jump into our layers. This is the first capture. And I'm not going to show you every single one where we arranged furniture. That would be kind of unnecessary for the purposes of this demo, but suffice to say, briefly, I'll just talk about vantage point. Now, when you're shooting bigger spaces or smaller spaces, and this is kind of a smaller space with a lot of furniture in this smaller space, vantage point is critical because finding the most important element in the shot, okay, or the most important feature in the shot, and in this case, to me, that's this back wall, is kind of where the artistry begins. Okay, it'd be very easy for us to compose a picture here, and put on a wider angle and really show all the furnishings and the entire space. But sometimes it's important to decide where the focus should be. And this is something that I'm going to recommend that you do on your next photo shoot. Put on a medium focal length lens. And this kind of allows you, with your eye through the frame, to focus in on specific design elements, seat groupings, important artwork, special textiles that the designers have used. And I just think it's a great kind of lesson to try to incorporate to your compositional efforts when you're doing a photo shoot. Okay, so we refined this, and this, for the record, this is a 40 millimeter lens. Okay, so the 40 millimeter, and on my camera system, let me just back it up a sec, that's the full frame. So that might be a person. I had people sitting on the staircase. We had people this is a tight space for us to shoot. And we had 15 photographers plus one, that's me, plus a couple of our camera and capture integration people. So we were all kind of huddled into this space. So, sometimes being a little bit more focused means, again, not to be too repetitive, it allows us to find the beauty in a space, find and define the architectural aspects of a space. Okay, so that's our first composition. It's pretty much straight out of camera. Beautiful window light, and I'm trying to let this quote unquote natural lighting, ambient lighting, help me define the look I want. But I tend to want to strategize, and depending upon the space, I want to define the look on my own, right? Again, depending upon the client, depending upon the subject, this could be kind of great, almost straight out of camera in a way. And maybe I'll spend a couple of minutes in the second section of this video to show you how we can massage and tweak just with this one raw file, and have a beautiful deliverable image just with this quote unquote natural light image. For the record, if you go to the before and after, let me see if it's going to click in for us. That's actually the raw file. Now, don't be kind of too swayed by the fact that the color temperature is wrong. I may have had the digital back white balance set, and this is probably the loaner camera. Capture Integration, with whom I've partnered on these workshops for the past 7 years, they usually provide all the camera equipment. Even though this is shot with my lens, so I can't. This is probably shot with my digital back. Now that I think about it, the IQ4 150. I may have had the white balance kind of set for default, which is probably daylight, but clearly that's not nearly warm enough. Remember, these are the foothills of Georgia. It's very dark outside, very green outside. So that white balance needed to be warmed up quite a bit, and we'll jump into that, see what my settings were. So I basically improved the white balance. Let's just take a look and see what magic I've put into this image already. So you see I've set the Kelvin to be about 61 and change, 6100 and change. I had to up the tint to 13. That's a lot, because again, if I zero this out, let's just take a look at it. You see how green that quote unquote daylight is, right? So I up the exposure 1.5 stops, but don't be fooled by that, thinking that I'm being irresponsible with my exposure sliders. Remember, I'm shooting this with the Phase 1 IQ4, and it has the dual exposure plus feature, which means it actually has effectively a bracket built into it. Okay, it has 2 exposures built into one raw file. Exposure A is at, you decide what the exposure is, but the point is the 2 different exposures are separated by 3 stops. So the first exposure, let's just say exposure A, is set at quote unquote normal. exposure, if I decide that exposure value is what I think it should be. And then the second exposure is 3 stops brighter. Okay, so if you see, if I happen to zero this out, and I'm hitting Option click to zero that out, that's the unadjusted exposure. But inside of Capture One, because I have a 3 stop brighter exposure kind of cooked into that raw data, I can in theory bump this 3 stops, and obviously this is all going to get blown out. But the point is if you look into these shadows, there is zero noise. You get some fingerprints, but you don't see any noise in those shadows because there is none, right? I'm still effectively shooting at an ISO 50, which is creamy and delicious, but you see my point. So typically for me, I'm usually shooting a little bit underexposed, maybe 1 to 2 stops underexposed, okay, quote unquote, for that base exposure, knowing that built into that raw file, I've got an extra 3 stops. So then inside of Capture One, I can push my exposure 1 to 2 stops easily. And I can go into my shadow slider and push my shadow slider, a little bit. And, of course, like any other file, you don't want to make it start to feel like HDR, but you can easily get away with pushing that and get a beautiful, satisfying look. If you started to feel like, oh, maybe these are getting a little bright, okay, let's just kind of go down a little bit here. And we're just playing a little bit with the raw file. That's 1.2 because I bumped that a little bit. Maybe I'll bring the shadows down a touch because I still want to keep some mood there. And I can boost the brightness. Now pay attention to the histogram here, because when you move the exposure slider, the entire histogram slides to the right. So effectively, watch the histogram move. I'm going to start blowing out my highlights pretty quickly, okay? But if I move the brightness slider, you're effectively nudging the midtones. So my point is brightness, you can get away with pushing that brightness a little bit harder before, and let me dial down the exposure a little bit. Let's say 0.8. You can push your brightness slider a little bit heavier and harder before you start blowing out your highlights. So this is another way to kind of play with it. Let's say 0.5, right? 0.5, and then push the brightness a little. And if we felt like, at that window, not that I need detail there, but let's just say for the sake of argument we wanted it, I can then pull my whites down. Here, look what happens when I pull the whites down all the way. I get all that detail back, right? Before, after, before, after. So let's say that's a little excessive, okay? And maybe bring that down a little bit. My point is with just a few sliders, knowing I have that extra 3 stops in my back pocket, let's just see what the levels are rather. I can even click auto levels, and auto levels typically will find, it'll want to put your, it'll want to create a histogram that has at least a pixel, maybe more than one, at 0, meaning 100% black, right? 0% light, and then at least a pixel or some that is 255, which is effectively the brightest pixel possible. So most of the time, if you click auto levels inside of virtually any software editor, but certainly inside Capture One, it's basically doing, it's crushing the ends of your histogram. Okay, I don't really believe in that. Let me go back to where we were, because I think that not every photograph, okay, needs to have a spectrum of luminosity from 0 to 255, meaning 100% black or 100% white. That said, if you look at my portfolio historically, okay, maybe some of this is my personal taste, maybe some of this is my history shooting film, which was typically a lot more contrasty. Maybe some of it's the subject matter itself and who my clients are. I'm not a flat kind of photographer. Most of the time I'm pushing, saturation to the edge. Most of the time I'm pushing my histogram and my contrast, maybe not to the edge, but I'm pushing it a little bit, right? So let's click auto one more time. For the purposes of what we're about to do, meaning if I wanted a base exposure or an ambient exposure, I would lean towards leaving my white point and black point as is. Okay, you can always add contrast afterwards, but once you have that contrast built in, let's just say I boosted the contrast ladder, once these blacks get crushed in processing, this may be too far gone, right? So don't go too crazy on your contrast adjustments in general, but certainly if you're going to be light blending like we are today, and we're going to review some of the light layers that we came up with, your base exposure or your ambient exposure, depending upon where you're going, shouldn't be completely crushed in terms of contrast. So I think this is actually kind of a nice place to start here. And that's not a bad, it's probably deliverable, okay, as is. But since that's not our personal taste, I'm, like I just said, I'm not a let's shoot it flat, deliver it, with a couple of boosts inside of post type of photographer. My aesthetics are, I want my light to be creative and fun and inspiring and whimsical, and most importantly, I want it to create an atmosphere that makes my clients' work even more special. Okay, so let's jump into some of our lighting layers. Now you can see, the peek behind the curtain here, what we've done to do a little bit of boosting here on some of these strobe layers. We obviously have our forget what we had outside there. I think it might have been a couple of different types of light modifiers. This might have been like 0 light modifiers, maybe just a reflector. And you can see we're getting pretty hard lines here near the window. As the light falls away from the window and you see these cast shadows start to bleed into ambience, you see how they kind of naturally do get a little bit diffused. Take a look at the sun the next time you are shooting an interior. Don't look at the sun. Take a look at the surfaces that the sun is hitting, especially when light is thrown through a window, and you will see similar properties. You will see a diffusion of the harshness or the hardness of your shadow lines. So this isn't necessarily an indicator that a photographer's put lighting out here, right? Here's a really great example where the cast shadow right next to the chair leg that's casting the shadow is super hard. And it's also darker, by the way, right? And this cast shadow is harder, but as it falls away, effectively gets softer. I'm pretty confident that this is going to feel believable. Now, whether you want that look or not, that's up to you. And so we definitely played a little with, first of all, light placement. So you'll see that we've moved that light around outside. We're throwing some shadows in maybe less than opportune places. But the haphazardness of stuff like this, the haphazardness of even this, is something for the longest time I didn't really want in my photography, but I'm now starting to enjoy. So be on the lookout for these kind of moments in even natural light, quote unquote, where you're showing up, it might be late afternoon or early morning, and you see this little moment happen, and it's kissing the back of where some accessories are, or where some of your client's product is. And I mean, is this a deliverable image? Yeah, maybe. I mean, these are things we're going to play with when we put our post-production and our masking together. But I'm just pointing these things out as we're going. So we went from kind of a hard application of our exterior light to a softer one. So we probably have a large umbrella, a medium or large umbrella just outside that window. Forgive me, it's been a couple of years, but right away, all of the lights get a little softer, if you will. You're seeing less harshness on the fabric. You're seeing a more even distribution of light inside the space as well. Because look at this from, I'm pretty sure the light didn't move here. That's kind of without a modifier. That's with a modifier. Pretty nice difference. There were two windows in the space. One of them was here, and then one of them was off camera left by this kind of little daybed. And so we decided to bring that umbrella forward and fire it through that closer window, and you get this beautiful light up front. And yeah, you notice a lot of retouching needs here. This kind of velour chair has a lot of issues that we're going to have to retouch and post. But I look for some cool stuff. Look at this moment here. These are little magical, bits of fairy dust that I think might be kind of fun to seek out, but you never know. This may or may not show up. And now that I'm looking, this is a lost opportunity for us, because if you take a look at what we came up with, now this post-production that I'm about to show you, where the hell is it? Is it here? Yeah. This is actually done at the workshop with everybody present. This is what I came up with on 2 days later, when we did our post-production seminar. And I didn't really capture or keep that pretty little highlight here. I love this. And I also love this. So we're going to see if we can't remember, fingers crossed, to include some of that. Then we came into the room, and you can see my good friend Bruce here, one of our photographer attendees. I believe Bruce is at the time of me filming this video for you right now, a three-time photographer. He'd come to 3 of our workshops. I'm very, very proud to say that we have repeat offenders, as they say. In fact, most of the people, well, I shouldn't say most, but many people who have come to our 6 workshops as of this particular screen recording have come 2, 3, 4, believe it or not, 5 out of 6 times. So there's Bruce, and what he's got is a Pro Photo. Let me zoom in a little more. That's a B10 plus unit with a grid spot on her, and just to kind of control and focus some little highlights here. Let's take a look at what else he has. Now, just to take a little bit of a peek how I've processed this. Once we're kind of inside, and mind you, this glass tint may have been tinting our, take a look at the white balance for a sec. All right, so though I tried to remain consistent here at about 5881 degrees Kelvin, but with a tint of 12.1. Once we're inside, you see the tint kind of went away, because this glass typically, and you might experience this where you're shooting, it has a lot of green in it, or a lot of cyan in it, that needs to be tinted out. And so the tint slider will do that for us. But I try to remain consistent as best I can in terms of overall degrees Kelvin and white balance with these lighting effects. So let's just take a look at all of them. And you see he's just firing that B10 plus with the grid spot just to throw some pops around, all from the same basic vantage point. He's reaching up, let's say that's about 7 feet, and you can imagine if light was coming in from this window, it would have a similar angle and shoot across. Look for the angle. You can create the illusion of light shaping, right, with these angles that I like. And you can, to a degree, create shading in terms of the angle. It's way more beneficial to have real cast shadows, like you see here. Real cast shadows. You see them real cast. I'm not so sure I like that one, but real cast shadows with the implied shape and light direction. It just brings the illusion together when we're masking this stuff in. Okay, so stay consistent from left to right in this case because that's where the window is. Stay consistent with your angle of shadow cast, and we've done a pretty good job doing that. Okay. Now, since this was a learning environment, we decided to play around a little bit with a couple of bounces because somebody said, "Hey, don't you ever bounce your light?" And my answer was rarely, but yes, yes, you can bounce your light to create a beautiful kind of top-down, soft effect, right? One other cool thing about the bounce, and this is what I'm about to kind of get to, why it's dangerous to bounce light sometimes, is your color temperature can shift depending upon what you're bouncing off of, obviously. But we've done some bouncing on these two workshops just because most people find it simpler. And frankly, it is a beautiful look. This kind of top-down softness is a beautiful look. So you notice a new white balance, okay? Because this is more accurate than if I set that at, what was it, 5880? Let's just set it to that, 5881. That's too yellow. Big difference, right? So that hard light that was coming out of the B10 Plus through the grid spot is certainly a cooler light, cooler in terms of color temperature than this bounce light off of these slightly warmer walls. Okay, so there's a couple of ways you can do that, and I'm not going to take too much time showing you that, but I would use normally the normalize tool. And you see I have it even here. Oh, sorry, Bruce. Let's get, let me zoom out here. So the white balance allows you to, with an eyedropper, pick a normalized color, and it could be any color. It could be the brown or gold from a piece of furniture, and then pick that color and then apply it to, by clicking over to this eyedropper, apply the normalized color to the same area of the picture. And that's basically what I did, and I got close to 5200 and then just basically said, okay, let's just make it all 5200, and now we're pretty consistent. And then of course we got our ambient layer with the lights on, because some people said, well, what about lights on for this space? We can experiment with that. I mean, you see at 5800 how ugly, how inconsistent, how much color casting we have. Are there ways to solve this? If I only had 30 seconds to shoot one picture and couldn't shut these lights off, and this was the shot, could I get that color balanced to normal without the benefit of any of these lighting layers and without the benefit of, where is it? This. The answer is yes, I could. There's lots of ways to kind of fudge and desaturate, and especially now with the new AI masking inside of Capture One, I can mask out the ceiling and do a different color bias or advanced color editing on the ceiling. I can really simply filter out some of these reds and get us closer. But I don't want to make this particular tutorial about that. I think in a future tutorial I may do that. But I think all of us know that it's just as easy to, if possible, and in a residential environment you can, pop these lights off like we did. Get the before, get the after, right? Lights off, lights on. Process just these two pictures. Okay? Let's say you don't own lights. Or let's say you don't have the time to do all this stuff that I love. Let's say all you had time to do was that, and where is it? This. can you do something special here? And can you color balance this? The answer is yes. And I think you guys know there's ways of blending these images together inside of Photoshop. You can't do it here because at least as the time of the screen recording, there is no such thing as laying or layering one image on top of another inside of Capture One, other than what I just showed you, which is the basic normalizing, meaning sampling colors from one and applying them to another. You can do that, but you can't put pixels on top of pixels, right? That's not what Capture One was really designed to do. But getting back to our light exploration, you'll notice that I kept this kind of subtle in terms of exposure. So for example, I didn't start opening this up, which admittedly it probably looks a little better brighter because you can get more detail in there. I could easily boost this +1, let's say, and boost all of these kind of bounce layers a +1. But let's not forget what I like to call room tone, right? Room tone is kind of a base exposure upon which we are going to add exposure. So if you're hitting the ceiling in terms of brightness, if your histogram is already bright, if your bar is already bright back here, right? Then when we start adding our highlights, oops, I chose the wrong one. When we start adding our highlights, there's no room for them, right? There's no room for this beautiful exposure if this is already bright. So point being, keep your room tone exposures, whether it's an ambient, okay, or bounce lights, which we're going to turn into room tone, a little bit quieter. I would say, just for the sake of, if you wanted a rule to kind of live by, and there are no rules, but a stop underexposed, does that feel good to you? Maybe a stop and a half underexposed. And by underexposed, I mean leaving headroom for highlights. You don't want to deliver, for the sake of argument, a dark, muddy looking picture. That would be not what I'm suggesting. But leave room for your highlights if you're going to be augmenting. And the same thing goes for your ambient frame. Now that said, this effectively is 2 frames built into one, right? So just for fun, what would happen if I right-clicked on it, and I cloned the variant? So now I have version 1, variant 1, variant 2. And in variant 2, I just kind of zeroed out these exposure boosts and just had a darker version. That might be kind of interesting. I can then, watch what I can do. Fine, let's play a little. Let's get our AI brushes just for a minute or two. I'm not clicking on anything, but if you hover over objects, Capture One has become very good at capturing, if pardon the pun, selecting pixels for masking. I'm not clicking on anything, I'm just hovering. So what happens if I click here, right? And let me hit M on my keyboard. M will show the mask. It even created a bit of a gradation out of that. I mean, it's gotten incredible, you guys. I'm clicking again. I wanted to select that back tile. Let me click M to hide that graphic. Just for fun, what happens if I boost with the shadow slider that tile a little? I mean, could I go into the exposure? Yeah, I can go to the exposure, but let's not go nuts. Let's go maybe +20, +30. Boost the exposure a wee. Okay. Now, because this is masked, anything else I click is going to get that same boost. Okay? That's going to get a boost. That's going to get a boost. This whole area is going to get a boost. For the record, you can also click and drag and try to, most of the time it does a pretty good job of allowing you to grab those areas you're interested in. So if I hit M again, you see it's grabbed quite a bit. Now, You might say to me, Barry, that's cool, but these edges are a bit bizarre. Why would it stop here? And it's left some stuff out. Of course, you can add to it. You can pick up a regular brush, right? And I can start to add to that. Or I can right click on the layer that has a mask, and I can do all different kinds of things to that mask. Just for the sake of simplicity, click Refine. When you click Refine, it gives you just one basic slider. Let me back up. Oh, well, let me back up. Basically, Refine does exactly what it says, what you think Refine does. It refines the mask. Refine is sort of halfway in between feather and fill. It kind of fills in those gaps I've discovered, and it also kind of feathers them into one another. You can go from 0, and you can see either, like for example, up in here, or this edge, and it goes all the way up to 300, where it really softens. I'm typically living around 100. Let's just type it in. 100, 100, apply, and let's back up a little. And refine mask is actually a cool way of softening the imperfections in a mask while still keeping the hardness of an edge. You can get pretty cool results masking a sky, for example, around buildings, around trees, and then go into that refine mask feature. And by the way, you can refine mask multiple times. I can say, oh, that wasn't enough, and you can hit it again, apply. All right, let me hit M to hide it. My point is, now that I've refined it twice, you'll see my adjustments before and after have become a little more natural feeling, right? Let's look at the original variant that I kind of boosted a little and pushed the shadows and bumped the brightness. And then this one, which is darker, that I've selectively boosted a little. You see what I'm trying to get at is the AI masking allows you to selectively, locally is another word, make adjustments to your raw files that are subtle or not so subtle. It's up to you. So I'll do one more. I'll create another empty layer, grab the masking brush, and let's say I wanted to boost this chair a touch. I hit the chair, okay, and I'm going to refine mask again. I almost always click refine mask, and you can click display mask during this refine process. You see, because I've kind of forgotten some of that. What happens if I boost that? Does it spread? You see, it starts to spread a little. And it's still, I'll be dang, it still keeps a hard edge. This is major magic happening here. Experiment with it. So I've now got that selected. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, we wanted that brighter. And I can brighten that slightly because it's theoretically was the same material on that little bolster pillow. Right? And now because I have it selected, I can do all kinds of stuff with it. I can change the color. I can do all kinds of cool things because it's selected. Now, this is not a beautiful result, what I just came up with, but I'm just mostly showing you that with a little bit of effort, okay, you can, and let's do one more. Blank layer. Let's just go old school. Let's get a radial gradient. And you can grab hold of these and move them. You can change the shape of them. Similar to Lightroom. I know you guys probably are familiar with that. I'm hoping you're doing all your work inside of Capture One at this point. But I have a radial gradient, and I can mess with my exposure there. I can move it around. I can change the shape of it again. There's still some things I'd rather do with lighting. Obviously. This is before, this is after. But you see how much fun you can have right inside of Capture One. Let me go and just boost the brightness slightly. Let's say I like that. And maybe open up the shadows slightly. So that's the original variant with just some, you know, HDR sliders and a little exposure boost. And that's the second one with some localized boosting. Now, we're going to do something way cooler than that with our lighting layers. But I just wanted to show you very briefly how cool Capture One has become, and how effective it is and can be. And of course, you guys having played with this know that it also has some pretty good, it has some pretty good cloning and heal tools, right? So if you're like, can I heal? Do I even have to go into Photoshop? The answer is, for certain things, you go into Photoshop. For certain things, let's not do that. For certain things, you can get away with the Capture One's heal tools. And if I'm on location and I'm shooting, and I have a client looking over my shoulder, and this vent is in every single picture, I'm like, you know what? Let's just get rid of it. Now, every capture subsequent to this one, excuse me, that vent is gone. And it's just less of a visual bit of noise to distract your eye. Right? All right, cool. Let's go ahead and let's process all these. I'm going to process all this stuff anyways. And just for fun, we'll leave this one as is. I'm going to darken this one slightly. Remember what I said? I need room. I need headroom for our exposures. Okay. I'm going to leave this one as is because it actually might be kind of neat to get all that glisten and kind of reflective quality in this tile work. Something that you may have noticed was missing in the first time I ran this, because primarily when you're shooting at a super fast shutter speed like we were, 60th isn't super fast, but it's fast enough to kill all that reflective quality in that tile work. Well, I'm bringing it back here. Pretty cool, right? In fact, we can even go another empty layer, AI mask, click it. Okay, same thing, right click, refine mask. Let's get a little bit lower, let's say about 100. And now I can put contrast back in. Maybe that's a little too much, maybe +9. Open the exposure slightly. This way I have some detail. I can even go into levels adjustments inside of any of these layers. I'm going to boost this a touch. Take it down a hair. Cool. So this is before, whoops, and after. Hope it's not redrawing. My computer's saying, hello, what are you doing? Okay. So this is what we're going to run with. Variant A ambient. And I want to make sure it's not too bright. Okay. Variant B ambient. This gorgeous lighting layer, yum. This lighting layer, this one with the umbrella, the foreground window with umbrella, spot 1, spot 2, spot 3, spot 4, spot 5, and then the 3 bounces, 1, 2, and 3. And let's not forget about this one, which I'm probably not going to use because I don't think this is pretty. Let me just make this a little darker now that I'm here. As if anything, I'm just going to keep those lampshades and these sconces. But honestly, I'm having processed this a few times. I usually prefer to have this stuff off. All right, so that's what we're going with, and I will see you in Photoshop, and we're going to put all this together.